The day started like any other, routine, predictable, even mundane. I was at my desk, halfway through reviewing a quarterly report, when my phone began buzzing. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was another string of unimportant notifications. But the buzzing didn't stop. When I finally picked it up, the barrage of messages was overwhelming. My heart sank as I scrolled through my notifications. Melanie, my wife of 6 years, had posted a lengthy, dramatic exposé on her social media, painting me as the villain in a narrative I didn't even know existed. Her words were brutal. "I've kept this in for too long. Caleb is a cheater and an abuser, and I won't stay silent anymore." Accompanying the post were photos of us, happy moments from years ago, now twisted into evidence against me. The comments were pouring in by the second. Friends and family rallied around her, offering support, advice, and outrage. Some people I barely knew chimed in, throwing my name into a public firestorm as though they knew the full story. "What the hell is this?" I muttered under my breath, rereading her post. My chest tightened as I processed the weight of her accusations. The word abuser hit like a gut punch. I had never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice beyond the occasional argument. Yet here she was, branding me as a monster to the world. The notifications kept coming, texts from mutual friends asking for my side of the story, emails from coworkers who had seen the post, and even a voicemail from my boss. "Caleb, I'm calling to check if you're okay. Let me know if you need help." I was stunned, blindsided by how quickly Melanie's lies had spiraled into a public spectacle. She'd always had a flair for dramatics, but this was calculated, deliberate. Beneath the shock, however, another emotion began to bubble up, anger. Not just at Melanie for her betrayal, but at myself for being blind to the signs. But then, as I set my phone down and forced myself to take a deep breath, a small, bitter smile crossed my lips. She had no idea what she was up against, because while Melanie was busy weaving her web of lies, she didn't know that I had been preparing for months. I had the truth, every text, every receipt, every damning piece of evidence that exposed her for what she truly was. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about taking control of the narrative she had tried to twist. Melanie thought she had one. She thought she could manipulate everyone into seeing me as the villain while playing the victim. But she had underestimated me. The truth wasn't just on my side. It was irrefutable. I sat at my desk for what felt like hours, staring at my phone as Melanie's post continued to gain traction. The comments were piling up, a sea of outrage aimed squarely at me. My hands clenched into fists as I scrolled through the vitriol. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my character, based entirely on Melanie's lies. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Clarity. I'd been blind to who Melanie truly was for far too long. Now, her actions had ripped away the facade, leaving nothing but the ugly truth behind. Our marriage had been on shaky ground for over a year, though I hadn't wanted to admit it. At first, I thought it was normal. Relationships go through rough patches, right? But as time went on, Melanie's behavior became harder to ignore. It started with small things. Late nights at the office that turned into entire weekends, phone calls she took in hushed tones, and text messages she'd quickly hide when I entered the room. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that she was just busy or stressed. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The turning point came one evening when she came home from one of her girls' nights, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. She claimed one of her friends had spilled a drink on her, laughing it off as though it were nothing. But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her story had too many gaps. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, wondering how much of our life together was a lie. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who snooped, who doubted his wife without reason. But Melanie gave me plenty of reasons. So I started paying closer attention, taking note of her inconsistencies, tracking her stories when they didn't add up. What I discovered wasn't just infidelity. It was an entirely different life. Melanie wasn't just seeing someone else. She was building an entire persona outside of our marriage. There were receipts for extravagant gifts charged to our joint account, hotel reservations under a fake name, and photos on her hidden social media accounts that painted a picture of a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't the hardworking, devoted wife she pretended to be. She was manipulative, deceitful, and calculating. And yet, through it all, I hoped she'd come clean. I hoped there was a part of her that still cared enough to tell me the truth. But instead, she doubled down on her lies. She played the victim, turning every argument into a twisted narrative where I was the villain and she was the saint. Now, with her public accusations, she had escalated to a level I never thought possible. She didn't just want out of the marriage. She wanted to destroy me in the process. As I sat there, my mind replaying the last year, I realized something. Melanie wasn't just attacking me out of anger or spite. She was doing it because she knew the walls were closing in. She knew I had the truth. And that's what scared her most. As I sifted through the folder of evidence I'd compiled over the past year, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a grim sense of satisfaction. Melanie had forced my hand, and now I had no choice but to lay everything bare. It had started with small things, moments that didn't add up, but once I decided to pay attention, the truth unraveled faster than I could have imagined. There were the receipts: hotel stays in the middle of the week, dinners at expensive restaurants, and luxury gifts charged to our joint account. When I first stumbled across them, I confronted her. Melanie, with her usual flair for drama, turned the conversation into a deflection. "How could you accuse me of something like that?" she'd cried, her voice trembling. "I've been working so hard, and this is the thanks I get?" She was good, too good. Her tears had softened my resolve, and for a time, I doubted myself. But then came the nights she didn't come home, the phone calls she refused to explain, the way she clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. That was when I decided to document everything. I started with the bank statements. I went back months, even years, cross-referencing charges I didn't recognize. The pattern was undeniable: dinners, hotels, gifts, all lining up with her work trips and girls' nights. Next came the photos. I installed a discreet camera in the living room, a small device tucked into the bookshelf. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I didn't have to wait long. The footage showed her hosting someone in our home while I was at work. It wasn't just one visit, it was multiple. And the man? I recognized him. He was one of her co-workers, someone she'd mentioned casually in passing, never hinting at anything more. But the most damning evidence came from her own phone. One night, while she was asleep, I managed to access it. I felt like a monster, scrolling through her messages, but what I found confirmed everything. The texts were explicit, detailing plans to meet, conversations about their connection, and even jokes at my expense. It was like a dagger to the heart, reading the words of the woman I had once trusted completely. For months, I kept this evidence to myself, hoping she would slip up, confess, or give me a reason to confront her. But Melanie was meticulous. She never admitted anything, always deflecting, always twisting the narrative to make me the bad guy. And now, she had gone public with her accusations, weaponizing her lies against me in the most brutal way possible. I opened the folder again, spreading the contents across the desk. Photos, receipts, screenshots, and videos. All the pieces of a puzzle she had thought she could keep hidden. She thought she could destroy me with her lies. But she didn't realize I had been preparing for this moment all along. It wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about exposing the truth. And now, I was ready to do exactly that. The morning after Melanie's accusations went viral was nothing short of a nightmare. I walked into the office feeling like all eyes were on me, and I wasn't imagining it. Whispers followed me down the hallways, and colleagues who had once greeted me warmly now avoided my gaze. The weight of judgment hung heavy in the air, even though no one had the courage to say anything outright. By mid-morning, I was summoned to my boss's office. I braced myself as I entered, the tension in the room palpable. "Caleb," he said, gesturing for me to sit. His expression was a mix of concern and discomfort. "I don't want to pry into your personal life, but this situation with your wife, it's causing quite a stir." I nodded, keeping my composure. "I understand, sir, but I can assure you, the accusations she's made are completely false." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I want to believe you. You've always been a valuable member of this team. But you know how these things go. Perception can be more damaging than the truth. Is there anything you can do to resolve this quickly? I hesitated for a moment, weighing my options. I'm working on it, I said finally. The truth will come out soon. He nodded, though his expression remained uncertain. I hope so for your sake. Just keep your head down, okay? When I left his office, my phone buzzed with yet another notification. This time, it was a message from Melanie's father, a man I had once respected and considered family. You've crossed the line, Caleb. I can't believe you'd hurt my daughter like this. Fix this mess, or you'll never see her or us again. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Melanie's lies had turned even her family against me, people who had known me for years. The betrayal cut deep, but I refused to let it break me. Later that day, a close friend called, his voice thick with hesitation. Hey man, I saw Melanie's post. What's going on? Is any of it true? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. No, it's not true, I said firmly. She's lying to cover her own tracks. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Look, I want to believe you, but you know how these things look from the outside. If you have proof, now's the time to show it. He wasn't wrong. The longer I stayed silent, the more people would assume guilt. But I wasn't ready to go public, not yet. That evening, I came home to find Melanie in the kitchen, humming to herself as if nothing had happened. The audacity of it made my blood boil. Enjoying the attention? I asked coldly, setting my briefcase on the counter. She turned to face me, her smile infuriatingly smug. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she said. People just needed to know the truth. The truth? I said, my voice rising. You mean the lies you've been spreading to make yourself look like the victim? Her expression hardened. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have had to say anything. I took a step closer, my anger barely contained. You think you can destroy me with your lies, Melanie? You think I'm just going to sit back and let you ruin my life? She crossed her arms, her confidence unwavering. What are you going to do about it, Caleb? Post some sob story about how you're the real victim? Good luck convincing anyone of that. For a moment, I considered showing her the evidence right then and there, throwing her lies back in her face. But I held back. This wasn't the time. When I revealed the truth, it would be on my terms, not hers. You'll see, I said finally, my voice cold and steady. You've underestimated me, Melanie, and you'll regret it. She rolled her eyes and turned back to the stove, as if dismissing me entirely. But I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her expression, the smallest crack in her armor. I went to my office and shut the door, the weight of the day settling heavily on my shoulders. The fallout had begun, but the real battle was still ahead. As I sat at my desk, staring at the folder of evidence, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let Melanie's lies define me. The truth would come out, and when it did, the world would see her for who she really was. The house was dark when I got back that evening, the kind of quiet that felt too intentional. Melanie's car was parked in the driveway, so I knew she was home. The stillness was almost mocking, as if she was daring me to come in and confront her. I closed the door behind me and paused in the entryway, listening. Faint music drifted from the living room, a soft, cheerful tune that clashed violently with the storm raging inside me. I walked down the hall, each step deliberate, until I found her curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. She looked up when I entered, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You're home," she said sweetly, as if she hadn't set my life on fire just days ago. I didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch. Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly, tilting her head as if to say, "What now?" "Have you seen the latest comments?" she asked, holding up her phone. "People are really coming to my defense. It's been overwhelming, but also validating, you know?" Her voice was light, almost playful, but her eyes were watching me closely, searching for a reaction. "Validating?" I repeated, my tone icy. I walked over to the couch and stood over her, my arms crossed. "You've destroyed my reputation, turned our friends and family against me, and you call that validating?" She shrugged. setting her phone down and reaching for her wine. People deserve to know the truth, Caleb. The truth? I snapped, my voice rising. You wouldn't know the truth if it hit you in the face, Melanie. You've lied to everyone about who I am, who we are, and you don't even care about the damage you've done. Her calm facade cracked for a moment, her eyes narrowing. Damage? Oh, please. You're acting like I ruined your life. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened. There it was again, the same tired deflection she always used to shift blame. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. You really think you're the victim here, I said quietly, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. You've lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone around you. And you still have the audacity to act like this is my fault. Melanie set her wine glass down with a sharp clink, standing to face me. You want to talk about lies, she said, her voice rising. What about the nights you worked late, ignoring me? Or the times you were so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't even notice I was unhappy? I noticed, I said coldly. I noticed everything. That's why I have proof. The color drained from her face, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. What are you talking about? I walked to the bookshelf, pulling out the folder I had carefully hidden among the rows of novels. I held it up, letting her see the weight of her own betrayal bound in black and white. This, I said, dropping the folder onto the coffee table with a thud. This is the truth, Melanie. Photos, receipts, texts, all of it. You think you've won because people believe your lies? Just wait until they see what you've been hiding. Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder, flipping through the pages with growing desperation. She skimmed the receipts, the photos of her sneaking into hotels, the messages to her lover mocking me behind my back. This is private, she stammered, her voice shaking. You had no right to. No right? I interrupted, my voice rising. You had no right to destroy my reputation, to turn me into the villain while you played the victim. You thought you could control the narrative, but you underestimated me, Melanie. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. She had weaponized her lies against me, and now she was facing the consequences. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned forward, my gaze steady. I'm going to show the world the real Melanie, and when I'm done, you'll wish you'd never started this war. She stared at me, speechless for the first time in months. I picked up the folder, tucking it under my arm as I turned to leave. You brought this on yourself, I said over my shoulder. Remember that. As I walked out of the room, I felt a sense of clarity. This was no longer about proving my innocence. It was about reclaiming my life. Melanie had tried to destroy me, but she didn't realize she was only making me stronger. The next morning, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen. The folder of evidence sat beside me, a tangible reminder of the lies and betrayal I had endured. It was time to expose the truth. No more waiting, no more hesitation. Melanie had forced my hand, and I wasn't going to let her control the narrative any longer. I composed an email, attaching the damning photos, receipts, and screenshots I had compiled over the past year. The message was simple. To those who have been misled, here is the truth. Make of it what you will. Caleb. The recipients were carefully chosen. Close friends, family members, and a few colleagues who had reached out to me, clearly torn between believing Melanie's accusations and trusting the person they thought they knew. My finger hovered over the send button for a moment. This wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about taking back my dignity, my integrity, and my life. With a deep breath, I clicked send. The response was immediate. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with notifications, texts, calls, and emails pouring in faster than I could keep up. I had no idea, Caleb. I'm so sorry. Wow. I don't even know what to say. She fooled us all. You didn't deserve this. Thank you for sharing the truth. Even Melanie's parents, who had been so quick to condemn me, sent a message. We need to talk. We didn't know. We're sorry. I leaned back in my chair, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over me. For months, I had carried the weight of her lies, but now, The truth was out in the open. By midday, Melanie's social media accounts had gone eerily silent. The post accusing me of abuse and infidelity was gone, along with dozens of others that had painted her as the victim. Her friends, once vocal in their support, were now either quiet or cautiously reaching out to me, trying to piece together the real story. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a call from Melanie. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering, my voice steady. "What do you want?" I asked. She was crying. "Caleb, please," she said, her voice cracking. "We need to talk. You didn't have to do this." "Didn't I?" I replied coldly. "You lied to everyone, Melanie. You dragged my name through the mud. You thought you could control the story, and now you're upset because the truth is finally out?" "I wasn't thinking," she said, her sobs making it hard to understand her. "I was angry and hurt, and I didn't know what else to do." "Angry and hurt?" I repeated, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You cheated on me, Melanie. You lied to me, to our friends, to your family. And when I didn't fall apart like you wanted, you tried to destroy me. Don't you dare play the victim now." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might hang up, but then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" "That's up to you," I said. "I've filed for divorce. You'll get the papers soon. Beyond that, I don't care what you do, as long as it doesn't involve me." "Caleb, please," she said again, her tone desperate. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy, try to rebuild." "No," I said firmly, cutting her off. "There's nothing to fix. You made your choices, Melanie, and now you'll have to live with them." The call ended with her sobbing into the phone, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. She had spent months tearing me down, and now she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. That evening, I received a message from one of Melanie's closest friends. "I had no idea what she was doing to you. I'm sorry for believing her lies." It wasn't the last apology I would receive, but it was the one that stood out the most. Even the people who had once been firmly in her corner were beginning to see her for who she really was. As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The truth was out, and Melanie could no longer control the narrative. She had tried to destroy me, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. This was the beginning of the end for her. And for me, it was the start of a new chapter. The fallout from Melanie's exposed lies was swift and brutal. By the next day, her once active social media accounts were a graveyard. Posts were deleted, comments turned off, and her profile picture reverted to a blank avatar. It was clear she was scrambling to contain the damage, but the truth had already spread too far to be contained. Messages continued pouring in, though now they carried a different tone. "Caleb, I can't believe I ever doubted you. I'm sorry. We all owe you an apology." Melanie fooled everyone. Even people who had initially condemned me were reaching out, their messages filled with guilt and shame for siding with her. My in-laws, silent since their initial threats, finally broke the silence with an email. "Caleb, we've seen the evidence. We don't know what to say other than we're sorry. Please, let's talk when you're ready." I didn't respond. Not yet. Their loyalty to Melanie, even in the face of her obvious deceit, had shown me where I truly stood in their lives. They had chosen to believe her lies without question, and I wasn't ready to forgive that. Meanwhile, Melanie was doing everything she could to regain control of the situation. She called me multiple times throughout the day, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to angry rants. "Caleb, please call me back. We need to talk. How could you do this to me? You've ruined my life. I made a mistake, okay? But you didn't have to humiliate me like this." I ignored every call, every text, every email. I wasn't interested in her excuses or her attempts at damage control. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. What surprised me most was the reaction from her friends. Some of them had been her loudest supporters when she first posted her accusations, flooding her comments with sympathy and outrage. But now, they were nowhere to be found. A few reached out to me, their messages dripping with regret. "Caleb, I'm so sorry for believing her. I feel like such an idiot. I don't know how Melanie could do this to you. If there's anything I can do to make it right, let me know. I wanted to be angry, to call them out for turning against me so easily, but what would that accomplish? Instead, I thanked them for their apologies and moved on. I didn't have the energy to hold grudges. Melanie's once close-knit social circle began to unravel. People started distancing themselves from her, unwilling to be associated with the woman who had lied so publicly and so viciously. Even her family seemed to be pulling back. Her mother, who had always been her staunchest defender, called me one evening. "I don't know what to say, Caleb," she admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence is undeniable. "I'm so sorry for everything. Why did you believe her in the first place?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated. "She's our daughter. When she came to us crying, telling us those awful things about you, we didn't think she'd lie about something like that. We were wrong, and I'm sorry." Her apology was sincere, but it didn't erase the damage they had done by blindly supporting Melanie. Still, I told her what I'd told everyone else. I need time. Right now, I'm focused on moving forward. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My lawyer, Rachel, ensured the divorce proceedings moved quickly, leveraging the mountain of evidence against Melanie to secure a favorable settlement. The house, the savings, even the car, all of it remained mine. Melanie would leave with nothing but the consequences of her actions. As for my reputation, the truth had done its work. My boss, after seeing the evidence for himself, called me into his office to apologize. "I'm sorry for doubting you, Caleb," he said. "It's clear you were the victim in all this. If you need anything, time off, support, just let me know." "I appreciate that," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. By the end of the month, Melanie had all but disappeared from my life. She moved out of the house, her once vibrant social life reduced to whispers and rumors. The few friends she had left were more cautious than supportive, clearly wary of being caught in her lies. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The storm Melanie had unleashed was finally dying down, and I was still standing. As I sat in my newly redecorated living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, I realized something. Melanie's damage control wasn't about fixing things, it was about saving herself. But no amount of spin could erase the truth. She had underestimated me, and now, she was paying the price. It didn't take long for the public to turn on Melanie. Once the truth started circulating, her carefully curated image began to crumble. People who had been her staunchest supporters were now questioning everything she had ever said. The whispers grew louder, and the backlash was relentless. Social media, the very weapon Melanie had used to destroy me, became her downfall. Posts that once garnered sympathy and support now attracted criticism and ridicule. "How could you lie like that? People believed you. You're the reason so many don't take real victims seriously. Shame on you for trying to ruin someone's life." Her attempt to delete her viral accusations and retreat into obscurity only made things worse. Screenshots of her original post continued to circulate, alongside the evidence I had shared. The internet has a long memory, and Melanie was quickly learning that running from her lies was impossible. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Melanie was struggling to keep up appearances. Her social circle, once vibrant and full of loyal friends, had dwindled to a few cautious holdouts. Even those who still spoke to her were careful not to be seen publicly associating with her. Her professional life wasn't spared, either. Word of the scandal reached her workplace, and while she wasn't outright fired, she was quietly pushed to the sidelines. Opportunities dried up, and the whispers of her deceit followed her wherever she went. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life. With Melanie out of the house and the divorce finalized, I poured my energy into my work and my relationships. Colleagues who had initially distanced themselves began reaching out, offering their support and apologizing for their silence. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing a new project proposal, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from a former mutual friend, someone who had initially taken Melanie's side. "Caleb, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know the full story, and I should have been more careful before believing her. If there's anything I can do to make it up to you, let me know." I stared at the message for a moment before responding. "Thank you. It means a lot to hear that. Let's just move forward." That became my mantra in the weeks that followed, moving forward. I had spent months fighting to clear my name, and now that the truth was out, I refused to let Melanie's actions define me any longer. But Melanie couldn't escape the consequences of her choices. One day, as I was leaving the office, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Caleb," a familiar voice said, trembling slightly. It was Melanie. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone cold. I wanted to apologize," she said. "I know I've ruined everything, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." Her words were hollow, empty. She wasn't apologizing because she felt genuine remorse. She was apologizing because she had no other option. "I don't need your apology," I said firmly. "I needed your honesty months ago, but it's too late for that now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry," before hanging up. I set the phone down, feeling a strange mix of closure and indifference. Melanie's downfall wasn't something I celebrated, but it wasn't something I mourned either. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. The backlash against her continued, but I didn't pay it much attention. My focus was on my future, not her mistakes. As I walked out of the office that evening, the city lights stretching out before me, I felt a sense of peace. The truth had prevailed, and for the first time in months, I was free from the weight of her lies. Melanie's public disgrace was a reminder that actions have consequences, but it was also a testament to the power of resilience. I had survived her betrayal, and now I was ready to thrive. With Melanie out of my life and the chaos she caused finally behind me, I focused on starting over. The house we had shared, once filled with memories that now felt tainted, was the first thing to go. I listed it almost immediately after the divorce was finalized and took quiet satisfaction in watching the "for sale" sign go up on the lawn. Selling the house wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. It represented shedding the last remnants of a life built on lies and moving forward into something new. By the end of the month, I had closed the deal and moved into a modest, modern apartment closer to the city. For the first time in years, I felt free. The transition wasn't without its challenges. My reputation, though mostly restored, still carried a shadow of doubt among some people. There were always those who whispered behind my back, who looked at me with lingering suspicion. But I refused to let them define me. The truth had come out, and I had learned to hold my head high, knowing I had done everything in my power to clear my name. Work became my sanctuary. Throwing myself into new projects and initiatives not only kept me busy, but also gave me a renewed sense of purpose. The respect I had earned from colleagues before Melanie's accusations slowly returned, and I began rebuilding relationships that had been strained by the scandal. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with old friends, the ones who had stayed silent during the turmoil but reached out afterward to offer their apologies and support. At first, I wasn't sure if I could let them back into my life. Their silence during my darkest moments had hurt more than they realized. But as time went on, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing their inaction. It was about freeing myself from the resentment. Slowly, cautiously, I allowed some of them back in, finding comfort in their renewed efforts to stand by me. Then there were the new connections. One evening, while browsing a bookstore downtown, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Clara. She was warm, down to earth, and had a smile that made it impossible not to smile back. What started as small talk about the books we were holding turned into a 2-hour conversation over coffee at a nearby cafe. Clara wasn't like Melanie. She didn't put on airs or try to impress me with stories of grandeur. She was honest and straightforward, with a quiet strength that drew me in. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't expected. She listened without judgment as I shared the story of my past, and instead of pity, she offered understanding. "You've been through a lot," she said one evening, her hand resting lightly on mine. "But you didn't let it break you. That says a lot about who you are." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I had focused on surviving Melanie's betrayal, on clearing my name and rebuilding my life. But Clara's perspective reminded me that the experience had shaped me into someone stronger, someone more resilient. As the months passed, my life began to feel whole again. The apartment, once a bare and unfamiliar space, became a home filled with warmth and comfort. Work thrived, friendships deepened, and my connection with Clara grew into something I hadn't dared to hope for, something real. Melanie, on the other hand, had faded into obscurity. Her social media presence was non-existent. Her friends had all but abandoned her, and the few mutual acquaintances who still spoke of her described a woman struggling to rebuild the life she had destroyed. I didn't dwell on her downfall. It wasn't out of pity or forgiveness. It was simply because she no longer mattered. Her actions had been a catalyst for change, but they no longer defined me or my future. One evening, as Clara and I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, she turned to me and said, "You're different now, aren't you? From who you were before all this." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I am, but in a good way. I've learned what matters and what doesn't." She smiled, leaning into me as we watched the city below. "You've come a long way, Caleb, and you deserve every bit of happiness that's coming your way." For the first time in years, I truly believed her. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my apartment, casting a warm glow across the room. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding a steaming cup of coffee and staring out at the city skyline. The journey from betrayal to peace had been long and grueling, but as I sat there, I realized just how far I'd come. The life I had now was nothing like the one I had shared with Melanie. It wasn't filled with the chaos of lies and manipulation. Instead, it was simple, steady, and honest. I had built it piece by piece, and for the first time in years, it felt entirely my own. Clara had become a constant presence in my life, her kindness and understanding a balm for wounds I hadn't even realized were still healing. She never pressed for more than I was willing to give, but she was always there, ready to listen, to support, to share in the small victories of my new life. One evening, as we sat together on my balcony, she looked at me with those piercing eyes of hers and asked, "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" I knew what she meant. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the loss of people I once thought I could trust. I considered her question carefully before answering. "No," I said finally. As painful as it was, it taught me things I needed to learn. About myself, about others, about what I'm willing to tolerate and what I'm not. If I hadn't gone through all of that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you. She smiled, her hand finding mine. "That's a good answer." The truth was, Melanie's betrayal had been a blessing in disguise. It had forced me to confront the parts of my life that weren't working, to let go of toxic relationships, and to rebuild from the ground up. It had been painful, yes, but it had also been transformative. As the months turned into a year, the scars left by Melanie's actions faded into the background. People stopped whispering when I walked into a room. My reputation, once tarnished by her lies, was now a testament to resilience and integrity. Even Melanie's name became a distant memory. The last I heard, she had moved to another city, trying to start over. Mutual acquaintances occasionally mentioned her, but their words carried no weight. She was no longer a part of my story. My focus was on the future. Clara and I spent our weekends exploring the city, hiking trails just outside of town, and sharing quiet evenings filled with laughter and conversation. She encouraged me to take risks, to step outside of my comfort zone, and to embrace the possibilities life had to offer. One day, while cleaning out old files, I came across the folder of evidence I had used to expose Melanie's lies. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the pain and anger that had driven me to compile it. Then, without a second thought, I tossed it into the shredder. That chapter of my life was over. There was no need to hold on to it anymore. As I stood on the balcony that evening, Clara by my side, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible. The city lights stretched out before us, a reminder of the endless opportunities that lay ahead. "This is it," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. She turned to me, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "This is the life I've been working toward," I said, meeting her gaze. "A life that's mine, one I built from the ground up." She smiled, leaning into me. "And it's a good life, Caleb. You deserve it." For the first time in years, I truly believed her. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle. It had all led to this moment. A life filled with peace, purpose, and the promise of something better. This was my new chapter, and I was ready to write it.